Silence was deadly, until someone coughed. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Say hello in the comments and let me know your location. Your words mean the world. I truly enjoy reading them. Let's begin. It started with a cough. Not one of Wolfe's, mind you. If he so much as clears his throat, it's with the gravity of a king issuing a proclamation. No, this was a different specimen, sharp, persistent, and lodged like a bad penny in the background of a Haydn quartet coming from the radio in the office. Wolfe was seated, naturally, at his desk in the big chair that might as well have been bolted to the floor. I was in the red chair, halfway through a cup of coffee that Fritz had somehow managed to make taste like both ambition and disappointment. It was just after 3 on a Tuesday, which for us meant no clients, no emergencies, and no movement that couldn't be avoided. Then the phone rang. Wolfe gave it a glance, but didn't twitch a muscle. I picked up. Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. If you're selling magazine subscriptions or salvation, I suggest you reconsider. The voice on the other end was a woman's. Mid-range, educated, with that clipped insistence that usually means she's used to having doors open before she knocks. Mr. Wolfe does not know me. My name is Lelia Rowan, but I need his assistance urgently. You and everyone else between here and Washington Square, I said. What kind of assistance are we talking about? Lost cat? Husband found a conscience? There was a pause, and then that cough again, this time muffled, but closer. Not hers, someone else's. I believe someone is manipulating my late husband's legacy. Financially, legally, and now personally. She inhaled. Someone left something in my apartment last night. Something that wasn't there before. I didn't imagine it. Care to get specific? I'll do better. I'll come to you. Now that was a phrase calculated to sour Wolfe's mood faster than Fritz could reheat a soufflé. I glanced at the man himself. He hadn't moved, but his nostrils had narrowed a fraction. That was as close to an emotional reaction as you'd get unless you'd just spilled beer on his orchid shelf. He prefers to go to no one and be gone to by no one, I said, especially uninvited. I understand, but someone's already been where they shouldn't be. I'd rather be a disturbance in your brownstone than a body in my living room. With that, she hung up. I set the receiver down and looked at Wolfe. Woman named Lelia Rowan. Says she's on her way. Dead husband, suspicious rearrangement of personal effects, ominous cough in the background. He closed his eyes and breathed out slowly, like he was inhaling his own reluctance. Confound it, Archie. Bolt the front door. You want me to turn her away? I want to ensure that if she arrives, she must knock. Twice. It is a ritual I find mildly civilizing. I nodded. Sure, and if she brings a financial retainer fat enough to settle your salt bill for the month. Wolfe opened his eyes. Then we shall permit the barbarism of her entry. And that's how it began. Not with a bang, or a scream, or a shot fired in the dark. Just a cough in the silence, and a woman who insisted she wasn't imagining things. That's always how they start, with people convinced they're not imagining things. And us? We imagine plenty, but only long enough to prove we're right. I unlocked the front door 20 minutes after hanging up the phone. Wolfe's idea of hospitality is the absence of it, and I didn't see much benefit in making Miss Rowan, or whatever she preferred, wait out her paranoia on our front stoop. Besides, a woman who uses phrases like rather be a disturbance than a body generally earns the right to be heard, if only because she's either in trouble or looking to cause it. She arrived at exactly 3:45. The cab that pulled up to our curb was a yellow one with the kind of fender dent that comes from years of polite urban warfare. She stepped out before the driver could help, her coat a gray cashmere number that probably had a label with an Italian name longer than most marriage vows. Her hair was pale gold, not quite blonde, styled with the kind of precision you only achieve with money or guilt. She didn't knock twice, just once, sharp and fast. That alone told me Wolfe wouldn't like her. I opened the door. Miss Rowan, I presume. Yes, thank you. She stepped in like someone entering a church. Not reverent exactly, but aware she didn't belong. Then, as her eyes met the great wooden paneling and the polished banister, her composure flickered for just a second. It smells like polish and tomatoes. That's Fritz for you, our cook. He believes a clean conscience starts with a clean skillet. She glanced around like she expected to see someone watching. Is he here? Fritz? He's in the kitchen where he belongs. Nero Wolfe's in the office where he belongs. You're in between. Follow me. She didn't speak again until we crossed into the office. Wolfe hadn't moved, though the position of his right hand had changed, now holding a small black book with a single yellow ribbon marking the page. A paperback version of Montaigne's essays, if I had to guess. He didn't look up. I said, Miss Lelia Rowan. Widow, concerned citizen, and potentially the newest reason you'll have to deal with more than one visitor this month. Wolfe grunted. That, in our business, is a greeting. She sat without being invited. Strike two. Wolfe noticed, of course, but let it pass. For now. I know this isn't your usual sort of case, Mr. Wolfe, she began, clasping her gloved hands together. There's no murder, no obvious theft, at least not yet. But I also know enough to trust my instincts. Someone's trying to make me question my memory, my judgment, even my sanity. That, madam, Wolfe said, is a rather lucrative field of sabotage. What makes yours worthy of scrutiny? My husband, Owen Rowan, died 9 weeks ago. He was a composer. Not famous, but respected in certain circles, especially after the last few pieces he published. Her voice had a practiced evenness to it, like she was reading copy aloud in an audition room. He left behind his works, some recordings, a sizable estate, and, more importantly, a reputation that meant something to the people who knew him. And people who didn't, I asked. She didn't smile. They're the problem. One in particular. Wolfe laid the book on the desk and adjusted his bulk. Continue, she exhaled. Owen had a protege, if you can call him that, a man named Victor Speck. Young, brash, always hanging around the apartment. He fancied himself a composer too, though I'd describe his work as aggressive noise in search of melody. Owen gave him time, space, even funding. I thought he was harmless. I was wrong. Miss Rowan, Mrs., she corrected. Mrs. Rowan, Wolfe said, showing visible irritation at the correction. You will confine yourself to facts, not adjectives. Your husband is dead. You believe this Speck is attempting what, precisely? She opened her bag and produced a cassette tape in a clear plastic case. 3 days ago, this was placed in my apartment. Not mailed. Not dropped in the box. Inside. On the bookshelf. My housekeeper swears she didn't see it. I didn't recognize the handwriting on the label, but I listened to it. She set it on Wolfe's desk with a decisive click. It's Owen's music. At least it starts that way. A piano piece. Simple. Repetitive. But then it changes. There's a second section. Dissonant, erratic, discordant. It's not his. But it's stitched in so seamlessly that if you didn't know Owen, you'd think he wrote the whole thing. That's rather bold, I said. It's more than bold, she snapped. It's deliberate. I think someone is trying to insert new work into Owen's posthumous catalogue. Pass off their own compositions using his style, his recordings, his name. Wolfe narrowed his eyes. And to what end? Recognition, or leverage, or control of the estate, or all three. Victor Speck would stand to gain from all of it. He's already claiming Owen left behind a final suite he entrusted to him, but there's no record of that. Not in the journals, not in the recordings. And Owen didn't trust Victor with anything beyond tuning the damn piano. Wolfe picked up the cassette with 2 fingers like it was something that might contain raw anchovy paste. A forgery of authorship is an accusation rarely proven. Art, unlike identity, has no fingerprints. I don't need it proven in court. I need to know who's lying, and why, and if I'm being watched. That made Wolfe shift, not physically, but intellectually. He'd heard something there. You believe you're being watched? She nodded. Things in the apartment moved. A coat hung wrong. A record sleeve out of order. A glass I didn't set down. Last night, someone coughed in the hall outside my bedroom. I thought it was the pipes. Then it happened again. Closer. Did you investigate? I asked. I opened the door and turned on every light. Nothing. No sound. But in the morning, the tape was on the shelf. Wolfe sighed. Confound it. You've brought us a trespass of suggestion, not substance. I'm bringing you the start of something, she said firmly. I came to you because I need to know who's behind it before it becomes real. That finally moved Wolfe to reach for his notepad. I knew the signs. He didn't believe her, not entirely, but he believed there was something there worth dissecting. Very well, he said. Mr. Goodwin will visit your apartment. He will observe the arrangements. He will retrieve any relevant documentation, and he will speak with this Victor Speck. She blinked. You'll take the case? I will consider its contours. That is not the same as accepting it, but yes, I'm intrigued. Do you think I'm overreacting? I think, Wolfe said, you are the most reliable source of misinformation in this matter, which is why I shall proceed. You will leave the cassette. Mr. Goodwin will accompany you to your residence. And then, if he finds what I expect, Wolfe murmured, then I shall invite your Mr. Speck to disturb my house, and from there we shall see who coughs next. I stood, grabbed my coat, and signaled her to lead the way. She didn't hesitate, but her back was straighter now, as if the act of telling the story had burned off some of the fear. As we stepped outside, I glanced back at Wolfe. He wasn't looking at us. He was staring at the tape. Not as a man hears music, as a man smells blood. Mrs. Rowan's apartment was on the Upper West Side in one of those pre-war buildings with high ceilings, bad water pressure, and just enough faded elegance to convince you rent control might be involved. She lived on the 6th floor in a unit with bay windows and a baby grand piano that looked as though it had seen both genius and grief. Do you live here alone now? I asked as she unlocked the door. Yes. I moved out for a few weeks after Owen's funeral. Stayed at my sister's. But I came back. I didn't want to leave things open. Her voice was steady, but the way she scanned the apartment as she walked in told me she was still waiting for that cough in the silence. The room smelled faintly of lavender and varnish, with a sharp undercurrent of something like paper dust. Where did you find the tape? I asked. Second shelf, right here. She pointed to a row of alphabetized cassettes arranged in labeled slipcases. One space was conspicuously empty, presumably where she'd pulled the intruder. Owen was meticulous. Everything in order. If anything was out of place, I noticed. I took a long look around the living room. It had the usual signs of an educated artist's home. Rows of books, framed programs from concert halls with names ending in hall or theater, and sheet music stacked with pathological neatness. Did your husband keep journals? I asked. She nodded and opened a cabinet beneath the record player. Inside were 4 identical leather-bound books, each labeled with a date range. I flipped through the last one. Musical sketches, observations, quotes in Latin, and an occasional line about dinner. On September 8th, 2 days before he died, he'd written, Victor's last visit. Wants the suite. Told him no. Not ready. Not yet. There is structure, but no soul. That was underlined. Twice. I looked up at her. When exactly did Owen die? September 10th. Collapsed during a rehearsal. The doctors said it was his heart. He was 56. He hadn't seen a doctor in over a decade. And Speck was around then? He came by on the 8th. They argued. I didn't hear all of it, but it was about the suite. Victor insisted it was time. Owen said no. He was furious. Said something about burying genius while it's still breathing. I told him to leave. I made a note. So Victor wants the rights. Claims Owen gave him something? She nodded. He says Owen entrusted him with the final composition, an unfinished work called Cantata for Silence. He's already petitioned the estate lawyer to recognize it. Does such a piece exist? Owen mentioned it to me once. But he was superstitious. He hated revealing anything unfinished. I walked over to the piano. The keys were slightly yellowed, the lid smudged where fingers had closed it without care. I lifted the lid and looked inside. No surprises. Then I scanned the room again. The space was clean but not scrubbed. No signs of a break-in. No jimmied locks or scratches. Does anyone else have a key to this place? My sister, Janice, and the housekeeper, Marta. That's all. Where's Marta now? She comes Tuesdays and Fridays. Today's not one of them. I walked through to the bedroom. The bed was made. Tight corners. The hallway was narrow and ended in a linen closet. I paused there. One of the closet doors didn't close flush. I opened it slowly. Towels, sheets, nothing unusual except for a faint scuff mark on the inside baseboard, like a heel had dragged across it. I crouched. A second scuff, almost identical, about 2 feet further in. Someone had stood in here, not long, but long enough to shift their weight and mark the trim. I returned to the living room. Did you check the closet outside your room after you heard the coughing? No. She looked at me, worried now. I didn't think of that. You might want to start. I took another glance around, then pocketed the cassette and the journal. I'll need these for Wolfe. He'll want to study both. She nodded, silent again. As I reached the door, she said, he never liked Victor. He told me once, that boy's in love with the sound of his own dissonance. That's a poetic way of saying egomaniac. She managed a small smile. Owen had better words for most things. Outside, the air smelled like October trying to pass itself off as September. I grabbed a cab downtown and called Saul Panzer from the back seat. Panzer, he answered. No wasted syllables. Saul, Archie. You busy tonight? I wasn't. Talk. Guy named Victor Speck, early 30s. Composer, hanger-on, possible tape forger. See what you can dig up. Musical circles, financial ties, legal filings. I want to know what coffee shop he cries into. I'll call you in 6 hours, earlier if he's interesting. I hung up and dialed the brownstone. Wolfe answered on the second ring. Yes. I've got the tape. I've got the journal. I've got the beginnings of a motive, and I've got a hallway closet that's been playing landlord to a mystery guest. Someone entered the apartment. Either that or Mrs. Rowan's closets have developed an itch. Return and bring the tape directly to the office. When I arrived, Wolfe had cleared his desk except for a cassette player I didn't know we owned. I handed him the tape. He slid it into the machine like it offended him. The first notes came soft and deliberate. Minor chords, deliberate pauses. It sounded like someone whispering through a piano. Then, around the 2-minute mark, the tone shifted. There was a key change. No, more than that, a personality change. The melody grew erratic. The timing stuttered. A fugue emerged where there had been clarity, the notes crowding each other like a subway platform at rush hour. Wolfe pressed stop. That, he said, is musical sabotage. You think it's Victor. I think it's not Owen Rowan. This portion, he rewound and replayed the final section, has the oral confidence of a composer desperate to be noticed. It is unworthy of the former and revealing of the latter. What now? He leaned back, steepled his fingers. We shall receive Mr. Speck. Extend an invitation. Politely. Make no accusations. Merely inform him that Mrs. Rowan is concerned, and that I am interested. What are we fishing for? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. We are fishing for vanity, and perhaps a cough. I started toward the door but turned. You think someone really was in the apartment? I think someone planted that tape, and I think they stayed to hear it discovered, which is altogether worse. It suggests not only trespass. He lifted the tape, turning it slowly in his fingers, but performance. Victor Speck arrived the following afternoon wearing a scarf that could have doubled as a sail and an expression like he'd just been asked to sign autographs at his own execution. I'd tracked him down at a rehearsal space in Midtown, a converted church basement with no heat and an echo like a tomb. He was standing at a battered, upright piano arguing with a soprano about tone control when I walked in. His eyes lit up when I said Nero Wolfe's name, though it was more spark than warmth. He didn't hesitate. Eager men rarely do. Now, seated in Wolfe's office with his fingers twitching against his knee, he seemed less eager and more caged. The scarf was still on. No one had explained to him that Wolfe's office maintains a consistent temperature suitable for tropical orchids and misanthropes. Wolfe didn't greet him, didn't even acknowledge his presence until I'd offered tea, which he declined and sat myself in the red chair. Then Wolfe looked up from the journal he'd been rereading and asked, "Do you consider yourself a composer, Mr. Speck?" Victor blinked. "Yes. I've published 5 works and premiered 2 more this year." A quantity. I'm asking about a quality." Victor bristled, but he held his ground. "I studied under Owen Rowan for 4 years. He said I had promise. He encouraged me." "And yet," Wolfe murmured, "he did not entrust you with the completion of Cantata for Silence. That is what he wrote in his journal." Victor's eyes darted to me. "You've seen his journal?" "Yes," I said. "It contains more music than memoir, and a fair bit less charity toward you than you might have hoped." "I don't care how he characterized me," Victor said sharply. "What matters is that he gave me the music. The cantata was never meant for anyone else. He told me it was unfinished, but close. He said someone would have to carry it over the threshold." "And you believe you are that someone?" Wolfe asked. "Yes." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie?" I opened the drawer beside me and took out the cassette. I set it down on the desk with a practiced, casual motion. Victor's eyes fixed on it. Wolfe continued, "You will now tell me if you had anything to do with placing this tape in Mrs. Rowan's apartment." Victor swallowed. No. I gave a version of the cantata to Mrs. Rowan's lawyer, as part of the estate inquiry. I didn't break into her home." "No one said you did," I noted. His jaw clenched. "Look, I won't pretend Owen and I didn't argue. We fought often, about tempo, about form, but I understood his work, I understood him, better than anyone." "Did you alter any of his original compositions?" Wolfe asked. "No." "Did you complete them?" Victor hesitated. "Only where he indicated intent. He left sketches, structural notes. It wasn't guesswork, it was deduction. He would have wanted his last piece heard." Wolfe nodded once, absently. Then, "Mr. Goodwin, describe the scuff marks." I did. Closet baseboard, 2 sets, not new, not quite old. Victor listened, his face neutral. "You don't think it was me," he said at last, "but you think someone's watching her, that she's being manipulated." "She thinks so," Wolfe said. "And I believe her?" Victor shifted forward in his seat. "I don't want her harmed. For God's sake, she buried her husband less than 2 months ago." "You want her cooperation." "I want the work released. Owen's name should be remembered for more than a slow death in a rehearsal chair." Wolfe tilted his head, studying him. "You are too emotional to have planted the tape. Too reactive. Too theatrical. This was the work of someone with quieter intentions." Victor frowned. "You don't think it's me?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that you are not the only one with access to Owen Rowan's home or his legacy. and I think someone is using your ambition as cover." Victor opened his mouth, closed it again. He stood slowly. "If I'm being used, I want to know by whom." "You will not act," Wolfe said. "You will not make inquiries. You will wait. If you are innocent, the truth will exonerate you. If not, well, I will know." Victor left in a state of confusion masquerading as composure. I watched him from the window as he crossed the street and stood for a full minute with his hands in his coat pockets, staring into nothing. When I turned back, Wolfe was already reaching for the phone. He called Saul Panzer. "Mr. Panzer, you will follow Mr. Victor Speck for the next 48 hours. Note any meetings, particularly with members of the Rowan family or their attorney. Report immediately if he deviates from his routines." He hung up and turned to me. "We must now speak with the housekeeper." "Marta?" "Yes. If anyone knew the rhythms of that apartment, it was she. Find her, and find out who else had reason to move in that silence." I left immediately. Marta Grunwald lived in Washington Heights. Her building was plain, brick, and smelled like steamed cabbage and arguments. She opened the door wearing a gray cardigan in suspicion. "I'm not talking to reporters," she said flatly. "Good, I'm not one." I flashed my license. "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. We're investigating something that may involve your former employer." Her expression softened, barely. "Mrs. Rowan." "Yes. What's happened?" I gave her the short version, the tape, the scuffs, the cough. She shook her head slowly. "I lock the door every time I leave." "Every time? I would have noticed if someone came in." "Do you ever leave it unlocked while cleaning?" "Never, unless Mrs. Rowan was home and told me to." "What about keys? Anyone else have copies?" "Only Janice, her sister." I made a note. "Ever hear anything strange during your visits?" She hesitated. "Once. A week before he died. Mr. Rowan was in the music room. I heard him shouting. Not like before. It was worse. Furious. I thought it was Victor, but it wasn't his voice." "Who was it?" "I don't know. I never saw them. But after that, Mr. Rowan told me to change the locks. I thought he was just being careful." "You changed them?" "Yes. New keys. Only him, Mrs. Rowan, and I had copies." "And Janice?" "She never asked for one. Said she didn't want the responsibility." I thanked her and left. The wind had picked up, cold enough to hurt the bridge of your nose. I called Wolfe from a phone booth. She heard someone argue with Rowan before he died. Not Speck, unknown voice. Male. Rowan changed the locks after. Wolfe's voice was sharp. "That narrows our suspect pool. You will visit Mrs. Rowan's sister, now." "Why? You think Janice is hiding something?" "I think we are ignoring the person with the least visibility and the most access." "Janice Rowan," I said aloud, thinking, "we'll see what she has to cough up." Wolfe grunted and hung up. I headed east, back into the quiet spaces of the Rowans' past, hunting for the person who'd stood in that hallway and waited for silence to fall. Janice Rowan lived in a co-op near Gramercy Park, the kind of building with fussy doormen and furniture that looked like it had never been sat in. I had to talk my way past a concierge who believed that anyone not wearing a tie was probably here to install cable or remove jewelry. She answered the door in a navy blouse and pearl earrings, with the expression of someone who didn't particularly want to know why you were there but was too polite not to ask. "You're Mr. Goodwin," she said before I could speak. "Lelia told me you might come. That saves us a minute. May I?" She hesitated, then stepped back. Briefly, "I'm about to leave for the gallery." I stepped inside. The apartment was white. Not pale, or soft, or cream. White. A deliberate, unwelcoming white, accented by art that screamed taste, louder than it screamed anything else. I took a seat on a sleek leather chair that might have cost more than my car, but was about half as comfortable. "I won't waste time," I said. Did you have a key to your sister's apartment? Number she offered once, but I declined. I live my own life. Ever visit unannounced? Certainly not. Lelia and I are sisters, not housemates. Were you close with Owen Rowan? She tilted her head. Insofar as my sister's husband needed to tolerate her family, yes. He was brilliant, difficult, private. We were cordial. You ever attend his rehearsals? Once or twice. Music isn't really my world. I prefer visual mediums. Were you aware of Victor Speck? That earned a frown. That boy. Of course. I didn't like him. Too theatrical, too desperate, always circling Owen like a mosquito in a cathedral. I don't know what Owen saw in him. And after Owen's death. I haven't seen Victor since the funeral. I don't intend to. Why all these questions? I took a small breath. Someone entered Lelia's apartment recently, left behind a forged tape, part Owen's music, part something else. We believe it was planted. Her eyes narrowed. And you think I don't think anything yet. But you have motive, proximity, and a family connection. That's a good enough trifecta for a courtesy visit. She stood. Mr. Goodwin, I'm not an ambitious composer. I'm not looking to rewrite history. I certainly don't need to break into my sister's apartment to prove a point. That's not a denial of capability. She sighed. Fine. If it helps, I was in Lenox last weekend, closing up our summer place. You're welcome to verify that. I nodded. I might. One last question. Did Owen ever mention someone else? Someone he fought with before he died? She froze, ever so slightly. Then, he fought with everyone. It's how he composed. Through friction, you'll need to be more specific. He told Marta to change the locks. That wasn't just friction. Now there was a real flicker. She recovered quickly, but it was there. I wasn't aware of that, she said softly. Maybe he was getting paranoid, or maybe he had reason. I stood. Thanks for the time. I might have more questions. She didn't walk me to the door. Back outside, I called Wolfe and gave him the rundown. He listened without interruption. She's hiding something, I concluded. She is concealing something, yes, Wolfe said. But not, I think, a crime. Concealment is her nature. Observation, Mr. Goodwin. Never confuse reticence for guilt. Did she offer alibis? Trip to Lenox. Said I could verify. Do so, but first, return. We must listen again. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe had the cassette queued up. The tape clicked and the first piano notes began. I stood by the bookshelves and listened. Again, that same subtle shift around the 2-minute mark. It had taken Wolfe a single listen to detect it. Me? I needed 3 tries to pin it. But this time, I caught something. There, I said suddenly. Pause it. He did. I rewound the tape a few seconds and played the same discordant sequence again. There's a cough, soft in the background. Wolfe's head moved slightly. I hadn't noticed that, he said. It's faint. Maybe caught during the recording, but it's there. The person who made the second half didn't scrub it. That, Wolfe said slowly, changes the nature of the deception. You think they recorded it in the apartment? I think they recorded it live, intending it to appear as a seamless extension, but they left a fingerprint, a breath, a cough. That's sloppy. That's emotional. He picked up the phone. Fritz, bring me coffee, and then call Saul. I raised an eyebrow. Victor, number. We must find the person who knew both the music and the man. Someone intimate enough to mimic his cadence and careless enough to believe their proximity excused their flaws. You have someone in mind? I suspect. But I require one more intrusion. He handed me a slip of paper. This is the address of Owen Rowan's former rehearsal studio. You will visit. If it is unlocked or if you can secure access, examine the piano. Look for signs of recent use. Fingerprint smudges. Sheet music, something left in a hurry. You think the tape was recorded there? I think the cough came from the room. The room, Mr. Goodwin, is where ghosts pretend they're still alive. I headed out again. The address led to a modest brown building just off Amsterdam, tucked between a locksmith and a used bookstore. The plaque read, Rowan Music Room, private sessions by appointment. The door was locked, but the side alley was accessible. I found a ground floor window with a cracked latch and invited myself in. Inside, it was cool and still. Dust hung in the air like suspended breath. The grand piano stood in the center of the room, its cover slightly askew. I approached, careful not to disturb anything. The keys showed signs of recent use. Smudges. One even had a faint fingerprint in what looked like powder, chalk or resin. There were notes on the music stand. Not sheet music. Handwritten scribbles, structural outlines, transitions, tempo changes, in 2 different inks. One part, delicate, clean, had Rowan's signature. The other was more angular, looser, impatient. I pocketed the notes carefully and returned to the brownstone. Wolfe was waiting. He examined the pages silently. Then, this was written by 2 people, but the latter hand. It is not Victor Specs. Not Janice either. Number him. It's someone closer, someone who had physical access, musical ambition, and enough insight to simulate a collaboration. I sat down. Lelia. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted the phone and called Saul. Mr. Panzer, drop spec. Begin surveillance on Mrs. Lelia Rowan. Focus on her movements between the hours of 9 and noon. She will be returning to the studio. He hung up and faced me. She was a pianist before she married. Played under her maiden name. Gave it up when she married Owen. But the skill remains. You think she forged the cantata? I think she completed it, using his drafts. For legacy. For relevance. For grief. And the tape. She planted it herself, but not to deceive us. To lure someone else. I frowned. Who? That, Mr. Goodwin, is what we must determine next. Because if I am right, she is not the saboteur. He leaned back. She is the bait. The next morning arrived like most at the brownstone, with eggs, silence, and the faint sound of Fritz arguing with a Hollandaise. I joined Wolfe in the dining room for breakfast, which he consumed without comment, his eyes on the Atlantic while mine were on a different kind of narrative. Saul called yet? I asked between bites. No, Wolfe said, without looking up. Which is good. When Saul has nothing to say, it means he's still learning. When he calls too quickly, it means we've miscalculated. I leaned back. So we're trusting Lelia Rowan deliberately planted that tape to draw someone out. That she didn't want to frame Victor, just trigger something. Yes, Wolfe said. She's orchestrating, not lying. She came to us as bait, not victim. But she didn't tell us. That's a risky move. She didn't need to, Wolfe replied. She knew someone would respond. She's creating a pressure chamber. The person she's drawing out will reveal themselves. And if they don't? They will, Wolfe said. The tape was an invitation, and whoever she's baiting knows it. The call came just after 11. Saul's voice was low, but clipped, his version of alarm. She went to the music studio, he said. Spent 20 minutes inside, left with nothing visible. Then she went to the 14th Street post office. She mailed something. What? Small envelope. Tracked. I tailed it. It's being delivered to a P.O. box uptown. Name on the label. J.R. Nichols, I blinked. Nichols. Not in any known family records. Alias, I ran it against Lelia, Owen, Janice, even Victor. Nothing. Stay on it, I said. Photograph anyone who collects it. I relayed the update to Wolfe. He closed his eyes and steepled his fingers. The alias is an acronym or homage, perhaps a name from Owen's past. Or a partner. No, Wolfe said firmly. This person has no stake in recognition, only access. That envelope likely contains something from the studio, a copy of the tape perhaps, or a warning to someone who's hiding. Wolfe opened his eyes, or someone watching. It was 2 hours later when Saul called again. "I got him," he said. Man in his 50s, tall, unshaven. Collected the envelope, looked inside, tossed it in his coat. Name on the box lease, Joseph Rayner Nichols. Listed occupation, audio engineer. Wolfe leaned forward. Where now? Tailing him west on 97th Street. He's heading toward the Hudson. No indication he knows I'm behind him. Has he responded to the envelope's contents? Not yet, but he's tense. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. Audio engineer. Could have helped Lelia forge the tape. Could have known Owen personally. Could have even recorded the second half himself. Wolfe nodded. He's the man in the closet. It took me a beat to follow. The cough? Yes. Rayner Nichols was in the apartment that night. Not just watching, listening, perhaps even playing, but not alone. You think he helped Lelia? No, Wolfe said. I think he helped someone else. And Lelia discovered him. That's why she came to us. Not because she was afraid of being watched, but because she knew who was watching her. I stood. You want me to talk to her? Number, you'll spook her. Let Saul finish the tale. If Mr. Nichols returns to the studio or meets anyone connected to the case, we act. Until then, we watch. Wolfe was right to wait. At 5:40 that evening, Saul called again. Rayner just entered a coffee shop near the park, met with someone. Who? He paused. Janice Rowan. That changed everything. I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes later. Saul was across the street in a booth with a line of sight. I took the other side. Through the front window, I could see Rayner and Janice in a tight, low conversation. She looked furious. He looked exhausted. They're arguing, Saul said, sipping from his mug. She passed him something. Envelope, probably cash. Blackmail? I asked. Debt, Saul said, or payoff. We waited another 10 minutes before Janice stood and left abruptly. Rayner lingered, rubbing his forehead, then followed. I tailed him to a walk-up near 105th. When he vanished inside, I buzzed. He answered over the intercom. Yeah. Mr. Nichols, I said. My name's Archie Goodwin. I'd like a word. There was a pause. You're with her? Who? Another pause. Then the door buzzed. Upstairs, the apartment was dark and smelled like takeout, solor, and nicotine. Rayner looked like a man who hadn't slept through the night since Clinton's first term. He waved me to a chair. Go ahead, he said. I figured someone was coming. I'll be plain. You recorded the second half of that tape, didn't you? He sighed. I helped record it. I didn't write it. Who did? He looked at me, then away. Janice. That made my head tick. Janice Rowan, but she said... She lied. She came to me weeks ago, said Owen had a posthumous work, said she found fragments in his things. She wanted it polished. She knew I worked with him before, back in his audio days. Why do it? She paid me. She also convinced me it was about legacy. I thought she had rights. I didn't know Lelia hadn't approved. And the cough? That was me. The mic was hot. She insisted on live takes for authenticity. We worked late. I told her it was risky. You ever go to the apartment? He hesitated. Once. Janice said it was empty, told me where the spare key was. We left the tape. I didn't want to. But you did. Yes. She said Lelia needed to hear it, to understand Owen's final statement. Did he even write it? He closed his eyes. Number, she did. She studied him for years, mimicked him. She wanted to be the one who defined his final chapter. I stood. That envelope you just received, what was in it? A letter from Lelia. She knows. She's giving Janice 3 days to confess. or she will. Wolfe will be very interested in that. Rayner shook his head. She won't confess. I know, I said, but she'll be summoned. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the whole tale. He didn't interrupt. At the end, he looked almost satisfied. She composed the ending, he said, and Lelia invited us in, not to catch her, but to force her hand. She knew all along. She suspected, but she lacked proof. So she created tension, pressure, a trail that would lead us not to Victor, not to Rayner, but to Janice. She wins? No one wins, Wolfe said, but the truth is now playable in full. I made the calls. The stage was set. The suspects would gather, and Wolfe, from his chair, would conduct the final movement. By the following afternoon, Wolfe's office was arranged with all the ceremony of a courtroom and the tension of a chess match, 2 moves from mate. The chairs were set, 1 each for Victor Speck, Janice Rowan, and Joseph Rayner Nichols. Lelia Rowan would stand, by her own insistence. I want to face her. I won't sit down until she speaks, she had said with the cool certainty of someone who had waited too long already. Wolfe sat behind his desk like a magistrate at a private trial. Fritz had dimmed the lights just slightly, though Wolfe would have denied that was intentional. But it worked. The space felt smaller, more intimate. No orchestra, but the room hummed like something was about to begin. Victor was the first to arrive, nervous, overdressed, and reeking of overcompensation. He nodded at Lelia, who barely returned it. Nichols followed, slow and apologetic, as though he were afraid to touch anything. Janice was last. Her heels clicked in the silence. She didn't glance at her sister. Wolfe didn't speak for a full 10 seconds after the last chair was filled. He sat, hands on the arms of his chair, eyes closed as if waiting for the vibrations of the room to align. Then, we are assembled not to litigate grief, nor to arbitrate legacy, but to reconstruct an act of deception. The room was still. A cassette tape was left in Mrs. Rowan's apartment, Wolfe continued. A musical forgery, part Owen Rowan's, part another's. It was planted with purpose. The question, until recently, was by whom and to what end. Janice shifted. Not much, but enough. Victor opened his mouth. Wolfe cut him off with a raised hand. Mr. Speck, you were ruled out early. You lacked the skill and subtlety required to forge Owen Rowan's work. You possess affectation, not imitation. Victor blinked, then frowned. Wolfe continued. Mr. Nichols, you are an engineer. You recorded Owen's work in the early years. You were approached recently with a proposition. Nichols cleared his throat. Yes. Janice Rowan contacted me. Said she had fragments. Notes Owen had left. Asked me to help build a complete piece. I was told it was part of his legacy. And you accepted. I believed her. I thought she had rights. You also knew it wasn't entirely true. Nichols didn't reply. Wolfe turned his eyes, heavy, deliberate, onto Janice. You orchestrated this, he said. You forged a final composition. You used your sister's grief, your connection to Owen, and Mr. Nichols' skills to create a tape that would appear as a final message from a dead man. Janice crossed her arms. He left pieces behind. I shaped them. He always said music was unfinished until it was heard. That was not your role, Wolfe said flatly. You had no authority, legal or moral, to revise his work posthumously. I had proximity, Janice said, and understanding. Owen and I... She paused, as if checking herself. He trusted me more than anyone. I knew his phrasing, his timing. I knew the cadence of his silence. Lelia finally spoke. You used his death to finish a performance he never wanted completed. I gave him closure. You gave yourself authorship, Wolfe interjected before voices could rise. The tape was planted in the apartment, not mailed, left deliberately. Nichols has confessed you were the architect. Do you deny this? Janice stood. Number I don't. Gasps. From Victor, from Nichols. Not from Lelia. Wolfe said, "Then we reach the heart of it. You left the tape to be found, but you did not expect your sister to bring it to me." "I thought she would destroy it," Janice said. "Erase it. Pretend it never happened. She never understood the music, only the man." "She understood both," Wolfe said. "And she understood what you were doing. That's why she came to me. Not because she needed me to find the tape's source, but because she needed a confrontation. You would never admit it to her, but you would to me." Janice's breath hitched. Lelia stepped forward. "You stole his voice." "I preserved it." "He didn't want it preserved that way." Wolfe lifted one hand. "Ladies, that debate is personal. It is not mine to moderate. But the truth is now known. The forged work will not be released. It will be documented as fraudulent. The estate and the name Owen Rowan will remain intact." Victor coughed, a strange sound in the silence. "So what now?" "No charges." Wolfe turned to him, weary. "You are not the injured party, Mr. Speck. Your mediocrity remains untouched." Victor flushed. Nichols asked softly, "And me?" "You are misled, but not innocent. Your credentials will carry a stain. That is your penance." Janice sat down finally. Not out of surrender, but because the weight had shifted. "I only wanted him to be heard," she said, almost to herself. Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Then, "You wanted him to be finished." He turned to Lelia. "You orchestrated this beautifully, the planting of evidence, the baiting of suspicion. You allowed the mystery to grow, knowing the path it would follow." She nodded. "I knew she had something to hide. I didn't know what, but I trusted you to make her say it out loud." "You trusted the pressure of truth," Wolfe said. "A rare thing." Then he closed the folder on his desk. "That, in our office, is the signal for dismissal." They filed out slowly, Janice last. She paused at the threshold and looked at her sister. "I never meant to hurt you." "You didn't," Lelia said. "You meant to edit me." Janice left without replying. I closed the door behind them and turned back to Wolfe. "That was neatly wrapped," he grunted. "Number it was untangled. There is a difference. Still, no murders, no blood, just music. And ambition," Wolfe added. "Always ambition." I went to pour myself a drink. Wolfe picked up his book again. As I sipped, he said without looking up, "Grief, Mr. Goodwin, seeks many companions. Sometimes it finds art. Sometimes it finds theft. And sometimes—" He trailed off. "Sometimes it finds a sister," I finished. He grunted again. Approval, I think. The brownstone was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't cough. The following morning brought rain, soft and slow, the kind that smudges city outlines and makes even the taxis seem introspective. Fritz served scrambled eggs and chive scones with an almost meditative silence. Wolfe grunted twice, once for the eggs, once for the paper, and sipped his coffee like the fate of civilization depended on the heat retention of his cup. I'd just finished going through Saul's final report, confirming that Janice had cancelled her second studio lease and Raynor Nichols had quietly shuttered his workshop, when Wolfe set his napkin down and declared, "This matter is concluded," which, for him, meant something closer to acceptable equilibrium restored than any real sense of satisfaction. Still, I knew better than to disagree. The Rowan affair had unfolded exactly as he preferred, under his roof, on his terms, powered by the simple forces of logic and discomfort. "I suppose Lelia won't be throwing us a thank-you banquet," I said. "She was never here for gratitude," Wolfe replied. "She sought confirmation. Her instincts were correct. That, for her, is compensation enough. She could have gone to the police." "No," he said. "That would have invited scrutiny. Debate. possibly sympathy for Janice. She wanted the truth said aloud and nothing more. Harsh. Just, Wolfe countered. She did not seek punishment, only clarity. I tilted back in my chair and let my eyes wander the office. The orchids in the corner had recently bloomed. Fritz had rearranged them so their petals tilted toward the east-facing window. Even plants were allowed a sense of direction around here. You know, I said, this wasn't really about music. Everything is about music, Wolfe said, closing the newspaper. Pattern, structure, variation, silence. That composition, however, fraudulent, was an act of manipulation, and a well-structured manipulation is very much like a fugue. One theme twisted through the voices of many. Poetic, necessary. He leaned back. The core violation was not the forgery of the tape. It was the invasion of an identity. Janice never wanted to be Owen. She just wanted to finish him. Worse, Wolfe said. She wanted to complete him, as if his death left her with a blank page to sign. We sat in silence a while. The rain thickened, tapping against the windows like an idea trying to get in. It didn't feel like the end of something, but more like the coda, a few quiet bars trailing off the end of a long, careful piece. At 11, the doorbell rang. I frowned. You expecting someone? No. I went to answer it. Lelia Rowan stood in the doorway. No coat, just a black umbrella folded under one arm and a canvas satchel in the other. She looked calmer than before, like someone who'd finally located the source of a faint noise that had haunted her for days. I won't stay long, she said. Come in, I told her, stepping aside. Wolfe looked up as she entered. He didn't rise, of course, but he gave her the attention one might reserve for a painting that deserved to be studied. I wanted to say thank you, she said plainly. Wolfe inclined his head. You orchestrated the outcome yourself. I merely provided structure. Still, she said, you played it through. You let it reach the right ears. She stepped forward and set the satchel on the edge of his desk. This is for you. Wolfe frowned. I do not receive gifts. This isn't a gift. It's a return. He opened the satchel slowly. Inside were 6 bound manuscripts. Sheet music. Owen's, by the look of the handwriting. Original pages, not photocopies. Each one dated and signed. I found them in the attic 2 nights ago, she said, after everything settled. I'd stopped looking for meaning in the wrong places. Wolfe flipped through the first folio. It was a chamber piece, unpublished. Clean, elegant, his signature at the end, followed by a note in pencil. Do not revise. Let it be. You see, she said. He finished more than we thought. Wolfe nodded, almost reverently. I'm having them archived, she added. But I wanted you to see them first, before they go into a vault. I appreciate your trust, Wolfe said. I also wanted to say, she hesitated. I don't know what my sister will do next, but she's left the apartment, gone back to Lennox. There's no more fight in her. There never was, Wolfe said gently. Only a longing to matter. Lelia's eyes flicked toward him, surprised at the softness. Maybe. Still, I forgive her. It's easier now that the silence isn't lying. She turned to me. And Mr. Goodwin, thank you for following the wrong steps until the right ones showed up. I gave her a smile, all part of the dance. She left without another word. We watched her go, then returned to the silence she'd briefly interrupted. Wolfe didn't speak for a long time. Finally, I said, You ever think about composing anything yourself? He glanced at me. I compose daily, Mr. Goodwin. Oh? Meals? Correspondence? Strategies? All are scores. The difference is that mine require no musicians. I could see you conducting. With a knife and fork, he grunted. I stood and stretched. So, that's that. Yes, he said. A quiet crime, an almost invisible wound, but no less real. He paused, considering. People rarely kill for music, but they lie for it, they rewrite it, they bend it toward themselves. And some try to finish what was never meant to be finished. Yes, Wolfe said, and that, in many ways, is more dangerous than murder. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the brownstone returned to what it always returned to: rhythm, precision, silence. Wolfe reached for the first folio again and examined the final line. I watched him for a moment, then poured myself another cup of coffee. And that was that. The music had stopped, but the truth, at last, had played all the way through. That evening I went for a walk. Call it habit, call it decompression, call it the Goodwin equivalent of smoking a pipe by the fire. After a case, especially one where nobody bled, but everyone bled metaphorically, I need the sidewalk under my shoes and the city murmuring around me. It's like clearing out a room that's just been argued in. The Rowan case, despite its lack of corpses, had left residue. The kind of intellectual residue that sticks behind your ears and makes you itch at stoplights. It was just past 8 when I strolled past Carnegie Hall. A crowd was gathered, elegant types, jackets too thin for the season, laughter sharp as champagne corks. I watched them for a minute. People who wanted to be seen hearing something meaningful. That's what this was all about, wasn't it? Not inheritance, not control, not even recognition, really. Just the desperate, dangerous hunger to be heard. When I returned to the brownstone, the lights were low and the air smelled faintly of Fritz's black bean soup and a recently snuffed cigar. Wolfe was in the office, naturally, rereading Plutarch like it might explain modern treachery. He looked up when I came in and gestured wordlessly to the side table. A cup of hot coffee was waiting, and beside it, a file folder I didn't recognize. I sat and opened it. Inside were 6 pages, typed, annotated. Wolfe's own notes from the Rowan case, condensed with his usual severity into observations, deductions, and final assessments. He'd titled it, On the Ethics of Posthumous Voice. I read through in silence. At the end, Wolfe said without looking up, "You believe I indulged sentiment. About Janice. About all of it." I thought for a moment. "Number, I think you let the truth reach the surface the way it had to. A confession under pressure is still a confession." He nodded slightly. "She will not face legal consequences. No law was broken. Not by statute," he said, "but by fidelity. She trespassed upon authorship. She bent another's voice. Her sister forgave her. Forgiveness does not correct a lie. It only buries it with ceremony." I sipped the coffee. "You ever been tempted?" I asked. "To forge? To finish something, someone else's work, maybe even better than they left it?" He raised an eyebrow. "There is no improvement in imitation." "I don't know. You improve half the statements I make." Wolfe grunted. "That is not imitation. That is filtration." I smiled and sat back. "So, what's next?" Wolfe turned a page. "Nothing. There is no next. There is only repetition, the endless parade of clever deceivers and indignant wrongdoers, until one of them thinks to pull a trigger instead of a trick. Optimistic. Statistically inevitable." I looked at the window. The rain had stopped. The world looked scrubbed. Then Wolfe said something he rarely said. Something that made me pause. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yeah?" I admired Lelia Rowan. I turned. Wolfe doesn't admire people. He tolerates them. He permits them to exist in his field of logic. Admiration is reserved for orchids, stubborn cheeses, and Montaigne. "She permitted no dramatics," he continued. "She asked for no vengeance. She sought only clarity. That is uncommon. She staged the truth like a sonata. She allowed it to arrive," Wolfe said. "Unforced, which is harder." We sat a while longer. Then he said, "Have you filed the bills?" "Yep, sent them off this afternoon. And the originals of the tape and notes. Delivered to her lawyer, with a nice note from you which I ghost wrote and you pretended to sign." He nodded once. Then the matter is finished. I was halfway to the door when Wolfe added, Mr. Goodwin. Again? Don't romanticize this case. It was not noble. I stopped, but it was human. He didn't answer that. And really, he didn't need to. Because we both knew some truths don't arrive with screams or gunshots or scandal. Some truths arrive quietly, like a wrong note in a familiar song. It sticks. You feel it. And once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. That was the cough in the silence. A lie whispered through music, a confession drawn out like a final breath, and a woman who knew the difference between a ghost and an echo. Wolfe returned to his book. I turned off the office light. And somewhere, far off in the city, someone was probably humming a tune they didn't know they'd stolen. The following Sunday was still and grey, the kind of day Wolfe favoured most. No rain, no sun, no excuses. The city outside pressed in with its usual low-level throb, but here inside the brownstone, all was calm. Fritz had the roast in early. Wolfe was on the balcony with the orchids, muttering to a stanhope that had the gall to bloom early. I was in the office, filing the last of the notes. Case closed. No headlines. No arrests. No scandal. Just an elegant deceit unwound, one thread at a time until the whole thing lay flat. It had ended quietly, as it should have. A letter had arrived from Lelia the day before. A short note, handwritten, thick cotton paper. She thanked Wolfe, briefly, directly. No sentimentality, no offers of further contact. But she included something else with it, a single sheet of music. It was Owen's handwriting. 4 bars, unfinished, scrawled beneath in pencil. Let it rest in silence. Wolfe didn't comment when I handed it to him. He took it, studied it, and slid it between the pages of a book that already held other mementos, those he would never call such. The quiet of that Sunday made me think about silence in a way I hadn't before. Most people think it's the absence of sound, but it isn't. It's a presence. It pushes. It fills. And in the Rowan case, it had done all the heavy lifting. It had smuggled in truth, suspicion, betrayal, all without a bang or a crash. Wolfe emerged from the orchid room around noon. He moved with the slow satisfaction of a man who had found aphids precisely where he expected to and routed them with surgical prejudice. "You've finished the filing?" he asked. "Yes. You even have fresh folders." "And the transcript of the final conversation?" "Typed and ready," he grunted. That was approval. We sat, as we did when no one needed us, in comfortable stasis. Wolfe drank his beer. I read the Times. At some point, I asked the question I'd been holding in reserve. "Why didn't you press Janice harder?" Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "Because she would have broken." "She already did break." "Numbers," she confessed. "That is not the same." I looked over. What would have happened if she hadn't? She would have been confronted by her sister. That would have been worse. She was spared by being exposed. Yes. And Lelia? She was never in danger. You didn't know that at the beginning. "No," Wolfe said, "but I suspected it. People who are hunted don't call in an audience." She wasn't afraid of harm. She was afraid of misunderstanding. I let that sit for a moment. "You think she loved Owen?" Wolfe opened his eyes. Completely. And that was the axis of the whole affair. Not ambition, not legacy. Love. Complicated, restrained, disciplined love. "She loved him," I said. "And her sister tried to finish him." "Her sister," Wolfe said, "wanted to be part of something she was never invited into." That is a lonely truth. One best whispered through art, then dismissed. "Sounds like you feel sorry for her." "No," he said, "but I understand. Her." I stood and stretched. The office was warm. I cracked the window an inch, letting in a curl of fresh air. There's no reward in this one, I said. Not materially. No newspaper calls. No headlines. No judge tipping his hat. No. So why did we take it? Wolfe turned in his chair. Because, Mr. Goodwin, there is no greater offense than a lie committed in the voice of the dead. I looked at him. You mean the forgery? I mean the theft of silence. A person's last unfinished thought, twisted into something else. That is a particular cruelty, and I do not abide cruelty. That surprised me. Not the philosophy, the admission. Usually Wolfe would rather chew chalk than state a personal principle outright. But there it was. No garnish. No hedging. He meant it. We passed the rest of the day in the ordinary rhythm of non-urgency. I took a walk. Wolfe napped. Fritz served roast lamb with mint sauce that might have made a bishop sin. Around 7, the phone rang once. Wrong number. By 8, Wolfe was back in the office, rereading a monograph on French vinegars. And I, because some habits are hard to kill, sat down to type up a short report for the files. Not because it needed to be done, but because it ought to be preserved. Case title: Nero Wolfe and the Cough in the Silence. Nature of case: artistic forgery. Manipulation of a deceased composer's work. Client: Mrs. Lelia Rowan. Opposing parties: Ms. Janice Rowan, Joseph Rayner Nichols. Accomplice. Key: fact: forged tape included unintended background cough, identifying live session not made by the deceased resolution, public release blocked, truth established via confrontation and confession, legal action, none pursued. Motive: emotional resolution, identity through proxy, grief-motivated appropriation. Quote from client. Verbatim. She didn't hurt me, she edited me. Final observation. Wolfe. There is no greater offense than a lie committed in the voice of the dead. I put the report in its folder and slid it into the cabinet. It didn't take up much space. Some truths don't. Then I sat back and listened. Not to noise, to the absence of it, to the long, clean note that follows a resolved chord, to the silence that this time didn't hide a lie. Just a man, a woman, a sister, a composer, and the stillness they left behind. The brownstone had returned to its natural order, and Wolfe, eyes closed, arms folded, was already composing his next refusal. 3 days after the Rowan case was officially filed and shelved, Wolfe emerged from the plant rooms unusually early, wiped a speck of dust off his vest with fastidious precision, and said, "Mr. Goodwin, I've written to the conservatory." That's how he began. I lowered my paper. "Which one?" "The Manhattan Conservatory of Music, to their archival committee. I've offered to provide the Rowan manuscripts discovered by Mrs. Rowan, on the condition that they include with any future exhibition the context in which the forgeries occurred, and the fact that one final piece remained unfinished by design." Historical asterisk, huh? "Correct. It is a hedge against romanticism." I smirked. "Since when are you the steward of musical ethics?" Wolfe settled heavily into his chair, the leather sighing beneath him. "Since it became necessary to state that the dead do not write posthumous duets with the living." That was the end of it. No lecture, no argument. Wolfe had placed his footnote in the cultural record, and now the business of the brownstone could resume its routine of avoidance, reluctance, and the occasional violent interruption. But there was one last call to make. I dialed Mrs. Rowan. She answered quickly. Calm, like always. She said she appreciated what Wolfe had done. She said she was settling Owen's estate with minimal trouble. She said Janice was in Lenox and not speaking to anyone, and that was, for now, a kind of peace. Before we hung up, I asked her one last question. "Did Owen ever ask you to finish his work if something happened to him?" There was a pause. Then, "No. He asked me not to." "Why?" "Because," she said, "he believed a final silence was as meaningful as a final note." I thanked her and hung up. I told Wolfe what she said. He closed his eyes. Then the true forgery, he said softly, was not in sound. It was in intention. I left him to his thoughts. And that, finally, was the real ending. A case without bullets, without blood, without a criminal in handcuffs, but not without cost. A sister's need to be part of genius, a widow's choice to preserve it instead. A cough captured on tape that broke open an entire illusion. And Wolfe, immovable, irritable, and as precise as a conductor, brought it all to order with nothing more than logic and his refusal to tolerate the misuse of silence. There are many ways to kill a man, and many more to rewrite him, but only a few, very few, can stop the rewrite. We keep the brownstone quiet for a reason, because here, silence means the case is closed,